And then you come back from the tour, and then they say, okay, we're going to do another tour, and we need another album, and we've got you booked in the studio in 3 weeks. So get going, and you'd go, geez, what are we going to, you know? And you'd have to go back to your house and start rattling stuff off, you know, really quickly.
It's true. It's you know, the pressure on you to make an album really quickly after a very successful one is unbelievable. You know, they expect it to be done in 5 minutes. Well, they don't realise how much effort went into the first one. So yeah, the funny thing was with Crimson, though, the albums got better as we progressed as a band. They from Larkstones and Aspic through to Stardust and Bible Black through to Red. For my money, Red is the best album from that lot.
Yeah.
But because we were wearing all the material in on the road before we actually got to record it, or most of it.
I think the strange thing that I found about the second UK album, Danger Money, was that there seemed to be a bigger push. Maybe that's just from my perspective, because I can remember they even issued a promotional 12-inch of Nothing to Lose. It even got played on the radio a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, why not push the band with the first album? Because normally they do a big push to the first album and then it tails off, and it was kind of inverse, really. Why do you think that was?
The first album, there was a bit of a tussle between Polygram and Atlantic as to who got it.
Right.
Do you remember that?
I don't.
And in the end, Polygram got it from Atlantic. Atlantic was a traditional home of progressive bands in America.
Yeah.
And we went to Polygram. They treated the first album as a kind of fusion album. Second one, they treated it as a kind of rock thing, much more of a mainstream rock. Plus, we were prepared to go out and do the stuff on the road.
There was also a deliberate shift in style on the second album, because the first album, as much as we liked the first album and thought it was a good album, it was perceived as a fusion band. We were perceived as a fusion band. And the first tour we did, maybe some of you saw it, was opening for Alan Di Meola. And which was fine, except that, you know, we thought of ourselves as something of an extension of the progressive rock genre and of the King Crimson model, and yet, you know, we were kind of being seen as, you know, Jean-Luc Ponty, Al Di Meola kind of fusion band, and being put on the bill with those audiences and those kinds of bands. And I think actually, John will remember this when I remind him, I think a key moment was that the first UK were put on a bill in Oklahoma with Van Halen.
Good match.
Actually, 2 concerts, both open air, like rock and roll festival type concerts.
The main reason for that was that Eddie Van Halen was a huge fan of Alan Holdsworth.
No, actually, I don't think that's the reason. I think it was just some bad booking. I think I've actually talked to Eddie Van Halen about this. I don't think Eddie Van Halen knew who Alan Holdsworth was until that concert, and as a result, you know, the audience hated us, and they were all, you know, rock and roll, you know. And Eddie Van Halen and Alex and the other guys in the band, not David Lee Roth, but the others, you know, they were digging the hell out of it at the side of the stage, you know, watching this, thinking this was the greatest band, you know. But the Oklahoma, you know, audience were not digging this at all. But as a result of that, Eddie ended up getting a record deal for Alan with Warner Brothers to help to get him a little more exposure. So, you know, Eddie became a huge fan of Alan's at that point. But anyway, back to the story. I remember specifically John being really a little bothered by the fact that we couldn't play to a real rock and roll audience, you know. We just couldn't do it, you know, because they just didn't like it, you know, and because we were so jazzy. And so after that, you know, right after that tour, we ended up making a change and decided that Bill and Alan should go off on their own and do their fusion thing, which they did on One of a Kind. and that we would deliberately take the band a little more obviously mainstream, so to speak. You know, so it was more of an obvious progressive rock thing, and really, even though we could have kind of kept some of the more fusion jazz elements, we deliberately decided not to.
I've never been a big fan of jazz, I must admit.
Right.
I mean, no, seriously, I'm not. I love classical music and I love rock music, and I love the fusion of those two things. But I'm not traditional kind of jazz stuff. Leaves me a little bit cold, I must admit.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, you know, a lot of people's reaction was, oh, you know, I really missed that whole fusion meld that we had going. But it was kind of a career move, essentially, that we just didn't really want to be in that camp, because it was starting to feel a little stale, that whole late 70s jazz fusion.
Actually, we wouldn't have survived.
No.
We wouldn't have survived, so...
So that was the sort of the thinking behind the Danger Money.
Yeah.
Was Terry Bozzio the obvious choice for the drum stool then?
And that was...
I know you were with him in Zappa's band, obviously.
Yeah, I was playing with Terry. I don't know if he was the obvious choice, but you know, Terry at the time, you know, was the real upcoming drum star of the world. You know, nobody was really playing drums like that at the time. So, you know, Terry was very impressive. And Bill's you can't really replace Bill, because Bill is so idiosyncratic. You know, he has just the Bill Bruford thing. And so rather than try to get somebody that just played like Bill, it was just like, all right, well, let's just do a different thing. And I'll tell you something else as well about that lineup. We didn't intend to be a trio. We actually approached one guitar player, and that was Eric Johnson.
Yeah, true.
Ah.
Who at the time was pretty unknown, and we'd seen him in a club somewhere
In Texas, I think.
in Texas.
It's really good. Yeah.
We thought he was really good, and we asked him if he would be interested in joining UK after Alan, and his manager just didn't want to know about it. So Eric kind of stayed in obscurity for about another 4 or 5 years, I think. I think that would have been a good move for him. In fact.
There was another suggestion, which is Gary Moore. If you,
Oh yeah, sure.
He's actually a lovely guitar player.
Yeah.
That didn't happen either.
I'd actually played with Gary, because Gary and I were on the same management when I was in Curved Air. So Gary used to open for Curved Air back in the day, in like '72. And so we used to jam and stuff in the afternoons when I was a wee boy. I think I was 8 at the time, 9. So anyway, that obviously didn't work out, and we just decided that the CS80 was big enough for anybody, so we could make enough noise as 3 people.
What inspired the reunion?
Okay, what inspired the reunion, I think, guys? John, do you want to...
We started talking again. Simple as that. It's
Well,
about 25 years of not talking to each other.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Why did he stop talking?
We made up. Well, you know, I came off the road after the Jethro Tull guest tour, the A tour. Somebody saw that? Yeah. Okay. I basically quit after that. I quit for 27 years. So I didn't go on stage at all in all that time, really. I did one walk-on with Jethro Tull briefly at the Meadowlands one night, played a couple of tunes, but otherwise, and we did that TV show, that Bach thing in Germany, so that twice that I actually played, but basically I came off the road for 27 years. And when I decided to go back on the road about 4 or 5 years ago, just to see if there's anything, you know, left in the tank, I formed a group called UKZ first.
Yeah.
And the idea of UKZ was to do completely new music, you know. And we did a little bit of that, but it was just really hard coming back up to 27 years, and you know, there's no structure left anymore. There are no promoters who know who the hell you are or care, and you know, so on and so forth. So instead I decided to have a second project called the UZ Project. And the idea of the UZ Project was that it would be an unabashed tribute band to the progressive rock genre. It wasn't meant to be doing new music, it was just meant to be a tribute group to the genre. So one of the concerts I put together for the UZ Project, I invited John, and I invited Tony Levin to come and join me in Poland. And surprisingly, John accepted. So John and Tony came over to Poland, and we did 3 shows in Poland. And quite frankly, I mean, it was just really good. It was really good for John and I to be playing the UK music, you know, together again with John's voice, having John's voice on it. And the real thing is just can't be beaten.
And also, Poland was comfortably far enough away that if it went horribly wrong, nobody would know about it.
John, if I can ask you, I can remember interviewing you in 1998, and you said you were working with Eddie then, and I said then, is this going to be a UK reunion? You said, I don't know yet. And it kind of fell apart. Why was that? Was it just not the right time for it?
I think my health has a lot to do with it. I'll fully admit that. It's kind of, I wasn't the easiest guy to get along with, and
No, he wasn't.
oh yeah, right, okay.
So next question.
Well, we got some people out in the audience with microphones. Anybody
Yes.
at the side down here? Steve, there's a gentleman down here in the front like to ask a question. Don't worry, sir, we will get to you, I promise. Down here, where the front, Steve, where are you? Can't miss him normally, he's really tall, long hair, tied back. Here he comes. Just down here in front of the stage. Right in the front. Put your hand in the air, sir, please. Want to ask the question? There we go. See him?
Hey guys, with having less... Okay, with the freedom that we have with the labels kind of not telling us what to do anymore, do you see the freedom of coming up with something completely that you really, really want to do and not be so controlled by the management and the labels and just really do what you want to do instead of being told what to do?
Well, now we have the freedom to make the records we want to make that nobody's going to buy. That's exactly
Well, I mean, as I said, I've been trying to do it with UKZ and see where that would go. A lot of the problem with the demise of the record company, you know, the industry as we knew it, I mean, it had lots of faults, many, and I was glad to get out of it, frankly, and I'm really glad not to be dealing with it now at all and to do everything myself with my own record label and all the rest of it. On the other hand, there was a structure in place. You know, the record companies knew how to get the records in the shops, they knew how to get things on the radio, they knew how to, you know, the promoters knew how to set up tours, we had managers, we had agents, we had PR people. There was an entire structure in place. You know, I mean, it's hard to believe that we had those luxuries now, you know. I mean, when I think about it, I think about UK, you know, our management company, EG, would say, okay guys, you know, you want to make, you know, the second album, Danger Money album. All right, we've got Air Studio, George Martin's studios already booked out. You know, it's booked, ready, waiting for you. Just like write the songs. We've got the rehearsal rooms already booked. The roadies have already set up all the gear there. You know, just go in, write some songs, do whatever you want to do. Go into George Martin's Air Studios in London with Jeff Emerick, who's the Beatles engineer, right? He'll be there recording you, and we didn't have to do anything other than just think of music to play. We never once ever had a record company person in the studio in all of that time. None of the records I've ever made do I ever remember having a record company person in the studio. Even then, we had such freedom just to, well, you just go and do what you do, and then we'll sell it. And that's kind of how it was in the 70s. That's why all the bands could make so much music that they wanted to make, and why every band was different. The Moody Blues had a mellotron, but they didn't sound like King Crimson. You know, everybody, the whole idea was to be different, and they let you do that. Obviously, that all changed around 1980, where it started to become much more formularized, and the record companies started to control what they wanted, and you know, they wanted this kind of song on the radio and all the rest of it. And now, even though that's all we have now, is just, you know, where the performers are pretty much just puppets now of the record companies. You know, they're just dancing girls. You know, they can whatever. You know, they have the songs written for them, everything's produced for them. They just sort of plug them in. Well, we want you to do this, and then do that again, do that again, do that again, and it's also formularized. So there's no place for people like us really anymore in that industry. And which in some ways is a good thing, gives us more freedom, but on the other hand, there's no structure left anymore. So now I find myself, for instance, you know, being the agent, you know, booking the concerts, you know, designing the artwork, you know, just managing things, doing the accounting. You know, I mean, I end up doing 15 jobs now, because it does, you know, and even just trying to get a gig in Portland, Oregon, or somewhere. It's kind of a bit of an effort, you know, because the promoter doesn't know who we are, even UK. It's like, who's it? I don't know who that is. You know, I don't know if you've got an audience because you haven't played in 33 years, you know, so what's wrong with that, you know, but you know, they don't see it as a viable business proposition to even put on a UK concert. So I often end up even promoting the concerts myself. I rent the theatres and just put on the concerts. So that's the problem, is that that structure that we relied on in the 70s is just gone, and now you just got to do it all yourself. And it's tough. It's tough. Because the sales are dwindling, concerts are dwindling, people aren't buying CDs anymore, you know, illegal downloading, all the rest of it. So it's tougher now. It's definitely tougher.
Okay, if we can maybe have one more question from the terrace, and then we have a song. Is that okay with you guys? Yeah? Okay. Okay, anybody got a question up there on the terrace? We've got Ernie up there with a microphone. Put your hand in the air if you want to ask John and Eddie a question. Oh, well, yeah, okay, there's a gentleman over here. It'll be my left, your right, probably, Ernie. Over here.